Eli tried to sleep. The comet continued its endless descent on the window. Somewhere across the city, a party decided to last forever and then became an institution. He heard the faintest thrum in the walls, a frequency he could not name. It felt like the building was breathing slowly so as not to startle him. At 3 a.m, he woke to find a message sitting on his pillow. It was shaped like a sugar cube and tasted like secrets. He placed it on his tongue, because some parts of him had always been naive. The message unfurled behind his eyes like film. If you can see this, the message said, "You have not been fully domesticated. That is unusual. My name is Sorrel. I am human. I am in the city, and I am not for sale. There's a game being played above your head. It will end badly for everything you have ever loved. Meet me at the market of borrowed names at first light. Do not bring your owners." He sat up. The room rotated politely to accommodate his uncertainty. The sugar cube dissolved into the memory of a fingerprint that belonged to someone who had learned how to hide. He whispered to the air, not because he believed the air was on his side, but because silence had stopped feeling useful. The air remained a professional. Palinode rustled faintly from a hallway, and then pretended not to rustle. In the morning, Rue burst in with a hat. The hat looked like it had been designed by a city attempting to impersonate a fruit. For the market, Rue announced, "We must not look local. Being local is a crime here." Kithra watched him with a smile that years of tutors would have called effortless. "Stay near Rue," she said to Eli. "If a merchant offers you a bargain that feels like a prophecy, ask for the short version." The market of borrowed names was a river of stalls that had never learned to respect lanes. Holograms rose like arguments. The air smelled like cinnamon learning new vocations. Vendors sang the virtues of their wares. You could purchase the sound a lighthouse makes when it's lonely. You could rent a childhood for an afternoon if your own had been busy. You could trade your reflection for a better one, and then watch the old you go on to live a quieter life. Eli had never owned so little or been tempted by so much. Rue tugged him through crowds with the urgency of a storm cloud that had just remembered an appointment. Palinode floated behind him at a respectful distance, acquiring and discarding pamphlets with the dignity of a paper moon. "Humans," someone called softly from a shadow between stalls. "Humans who are not for display." Eli turned. A figure in a coat of mismatched fabric stood with their hands tucked into a pocket that might have been a mouth. Their hair had made a pact with disobedience and won. Their eyes belonged to photographs that had learned to move. They smiled the way a lock smiles at a key it has not met yet. "Sorrel," they said, and did not offer a hand because handshakes meant different things in different neighborhoods. "You ate the message, so either you are bold or hungry." "Both," Eli said, because the truth takes less time to learn. Rue extended a pseudopod politely. "We are Rue. We are not property. We are family. We are extremely dangerous when disappointed." Sorrel looked delighted. "Excellent. I have missed being threatened by affectionate gelatin." They turned back to Eli. "You are owned by Kithervale. Her parties are kind to gravity. Her heart is sincere in all the ways that damage should be sincere. She keeps a human for the same reason she keeps 19 constellations on retainer. She believes care is an art form. She is wrong. Care is an argument." Eli thought of Kithra's face when he talked about the diner by the river. He thought of her asking for a story like a thirsty person asking for a glass. "Why did you call me?" he asked. "What is above my head that will end badly?" Sorrel stepped deeper into the shadow. The stalls around them sold amulets that promised to keep secrets safe by making them boring. "Valoria is building a machine," Sorrel said. "They always are, of course. This one is called the Chorus. It started as a joke, because everything here is safer if it starts as a joke. The chorus takes patterns and amplifies them until they become laws. Laughing becomes policy. Fashion becomes policy. Hunger becomes policy. They intend to aim it at the spiral arms and harmonize the unruly." Eli waited for the part where he was supposed to intervene and fail. "What does that have to do with me?" Sorrel's expression shifted into the shape of a dare. "Humans are good at contagious. Your humor travels like wildfire that apologizes afterward. Your melancholy goes viral even when it is off duty. Valoria will plug you into the chorus and sell your sensitivity in bulk. They will launder the will of an empire through your ache. They will call it empathy. Every planet that buys will think they are choosing kindness. They will not notice they have chosen obedience. Rue inflated with offense until a vendor asked them kindly not to block the sun. "We forbid this," Rue declared. "We veto the sky. We have decided." Palinode drifted closer. Its pages trembled. If this is accurate, it said, "We must alert Lady Kythera. She contributes to the chorus as a curator, not as a tyrant. She will not wish to be complicit in musical colonization." Sorrel's smile thinned. "Do you think the city worries about the wishes of its aristocrats? The city worries about the person at the center of the algorithm. It is not Kythera. It is not the council. It is the one with a face that goes everywhere. The person who can make an empire believe that consent feels like applause." "Not me," Eli said, and heard the smallness in his own voice. "I am not built for center. I am built for getting lost and telling stories about the places I never intended to reach." "Exactly," Sorrel said softly. "They will make you the face because you are not the kind of face that wants it. The chorus will wear you like a glove. It will call itself compassion. It will ask the galaxy to say yes, and it will be very difficult to say no to you." A bell rang across the market, a sound borrowed from a monastery on a moon that had never heard of monasteries. The stalls changed their wares. Afternoon leaned into the stalls, as if to ask what the evening would cost. Rue tugged at Eli's sleeve. "We must go," they said. "We promised to try the stall where they sell the smell of books." Palinode hovered, page displayed in calculation. "If we return to Lady Kythera with this intelligence, we may avert a scandal. If we do not, we may avert a catastrophe. The choice appears to be between personal safety and a story with a regrettable ending." Sorrel stepped out of the shadow and for the first time looked frightened. "You have very little time," they said. "Not because the machine will be finished tomorrow. Because they have already started to rehearse with you. Every party you attend, every anecdote you make into a chandelier, every guest who feels less alone hearing your weather reports, it all tests the range of your voice. They are measuring how far you can travel." On cue, someone called Eli's name. The sound came from everywhere a little bit. He turned. A camera he had never seen settled into orbit around his head. A crowd gathered because crowds were a hobby here. Someone handed him a microphone that was also a drink. He could smell cinnamon again, but angrier. "Tell us about love," a stranger said with an eagerness that would have been hunger if it had belonged to a mouth. "Tell us about the last human you kissed. Make us cry in a way we can monetize." Eli had always been good at doing the thing expected of him when he could not afford to fail. He opened his mouth. A story found its feet. It was a true story because truth takes less rehearsal. It walked into the market with him and stood under the bell. He spoke. The crowd softened. The vendors leaned closer. The camera drank. He watched the story leave his hands and go to work for people he had never met. He watched it earn. He watched it return to him stripped of everything that had made it dangerous and dressed in currency. He stopped before the ending. He put the microphone down gently as if returning a borrowed animal to its habitat. He smiled the way a person smiles in a photograph taken in a waiting room. "I am tired," he said, and the translator chose a word that meant storage depleted. Kythera emerged from the crowd the way a storm emerges from good weather. She wrapped an arm around him in a gesture she had practiced on expensive vases. "There you are," she said, and the city accepted the narrative that he had been here all along. "Come, we will go home. You have been generous with your humanness. We are grateful." Sorrel watched him leave with an expression he could not name. It was not pity. Pity is tidy. This was a Messier room. Back in the hover litter, the city fell away in sheets of color and iron. Kythera held his hand, as if anchoring him would prevent the wind from making him a law. Palinode recited updates softly to itself. Rue pressed their face against the window and tried to memorize everyone they could see. "You disappeared this morning," Kythera said finally. "Palinode does not disappear, so I assume you were not alone." "I met someone," Eli said. He imagined Sorrel's sugar cube voice. He imagined machines that turned kindness into a leash. They told me a story about a chorus. Kithara closed her eyes. A flicker of pain crossed her features like a bird changing its mind. "Yes," she said. "I had hoped you would not hear about it like this. We are building a solution. We call it the chorus because all problems forgive a metaphor. The outer colonies are fraying. War is fashionable again. Empathy needs scale. We will give it scale." "What if scale ruins it?" Eli said. "What if you pour it over everything and it drowns the small places where it learns how to be itself?" Kithara looked at him as if he had turned into a door. "Your caution is one of the reasons we chose you," she said. "You do not trust beautiful answers. You demand receipts. I respect that. Come upstairs. I will show you the architecture, and you can tell me where the cracks should be." On the penthouse terrace, the night arranged itself into a stage. A model of the chorus hovered between them, a living diagram of influence. Threads of light connected neighborhoods to cities to planets to a network that made maps look old-fashioned. At the center of the web there was a silhouette so human it hurt. Kithara touched the silhouette and it lit. "Not yours," she said softly. "A placeholder. We would never conscript you. You would be asked. You would be paid. You would be adored. And you would be protected by me, who can afford to be sincere." He studied the threads. They were beautiful, which is one way to disguise teeth. He followed one strand to a node and found a school where children were laughing at the same time because a singer breathed at them. He followed another to a planet where a woman was breaking a law gently for the first time and did not feel afraid because someone else had whispered a story into the room first. He wanted to believe in this. He wanted to stand at a window and make loneliness obsolete. He wanted to announce to the dark that it could go home early tonight. He wanted to help, a humble verb that becomes dangerous when given a budget. "Let me think," he said. "Of course," Kithara said. "Take as long as you need. We are rich enough for patience." Later, when the house pretended to sleep, he stepped onto the balcony alone. The city was an animal that had learned to purr. He held the sugar taste of sorrow's warnings on his tongue and the silk of Kithara's promises in his hands. He stood between two kinds of love, the kind that looks like a rescue and the kind that looks like a door closing gently. Behind him, Palinode hovered at the threshold with the respect of a librarian guarding a sacred noise. "If you wish to run," it said without turning any page, "I will give you a head start. Loyalty that cannot abide disobedience is not loyalty. It is ownership, and I was not built to curate that." He laughed quietly because no one had ever offered him permission to become a problem. "Where would I go?" he asked. "Into the story," Palinode said. "That is where humans are most difficult to keep." He looked out over Valoria Prime and imagined himself disappearing into it. He imagined walking the market until his feet learned new proverbs. He imagined finding Sorrel again and asking for a map made of mistakes. He imagined saying yes to the chorus and watching the universe bend toward kindness until kindness snapped. He put his hands on the railing and decided nothing. Deciding is a luxury. Sometimes surviving is the only art form available. In the days that followed, invitations multiplied. He became the event other events were proud to be at. A senator asked him to narrate a peace treaty as if peace were a bedtime story. A designer draped him in fabric woven from headlines that had regretted themselves. Everywhere he went, the chorus watched him the way a magnet watches paper clips. At a gala dedicated to things that shone, he stood under a sculpture that rearranged itself into the one thing you miss most. It failed with him. It grew frustrated and turned into a bicycle. Sorrel appeared at his side, as if materializing were a habit they could not quit. "I have a path for you," they said. "It is illegal in a way that makes the law blush. It leads to the bones of the city, to the place where the chorus rehearses and the architect eats their breakfast. If you take it, you will lose Kithara. If you do not take it, you will lose yourself." Eli looked across the room at Kithara. She was listening to an ambassador with her attention lit to full. She laughed at something careful. Her face, for an instant, was simply a face unsupervised by the city, and he saw the truth he had been refusing to give a name. She wanted to save the world, but she had not asked the world if it wanted to be saved that way. He turned back to Sorrel. Show me. They left the party through a hallway that did not exist for people who wanted to leave parties. Rue slipped out from behind a curtain, glowing with panic and loyalty. We cannot let you go alone, they said. We stick. We are adhesive. We love messes. Palinode joined without being asked because books have always followed fugitives. The four of them descended through floors that had never imagined they could be descended through. The light thinned. The city forgot to speak their names. Pipes began to look like bones that had been convinced to dream in circles. This is where the music will come from, Sorrel said, leading them into a chamber full of stones that were listening. This is where they will tune your stories to a frequency that makes armies put down their knives and then makes them pick up other acceptable tools instead. This is where they will ask your voice to become an algorithm and then swear it stayed a voice. Eli stepped toward the center of the room. The stones vibrated in recognition. He felt something in his chest stretch as if invited to become architecture. He imagined what it would be like to be everywhere at once. To be the lullaby and the anthem, the whisper and the shout, to be the remedy people reach for when they did not know what to do with their hands. He also imagined silence. He imagined a child by a river listening to the water decide how to be a river that day. He imagined a town that kept its accent on purpose. He imagined refusal as a gift. A lever waited in the floor, ceremonial and honest. Sorrel nodded toward it with the compassion of a surgeon offering a mirror. If you pull this, they said, the chorus sleeps for a year. The city will call it vandalism. The empire will call it terrorism. The people who keep small things alive will call it a chance to remember how. Eli closed his hand around the lever. He thought of Kithra's apology for Earth, of Rue's joy, of Palinode's offered treason, of Sorrel's eyes that had no patience for being sold. He thought of himself not as a product, but as a person who could be blamed. He did not pull. Not yet. Above them the city inhaled, poised to sing. He looked at his friends and at the dark and at the future that was already waiting with its palm out. We are not ready, he said, but we are here. The room agreed. The stones warmed. Somewhere, faintly, the first notes of the chorus traveled through granite like rumor. He stood between the lever and the music and understood at last what kind of story he had been purchased for. Not the kind where a hero says no to a villain, and the credits arrive on time. The other kind, the kind where a flawed person stands in the middle of a machine and decides, one day at a time, what would be allowed to do to people who never volunteered. He released the lever. He turned to Sorrel. He turned to Rue. He turned to Palinode. He turned toward the stair that would deliver him back to a party that had continued without him and to a woman who loved him a way that could not survive the truth. Tomorrow, he said, we will be braver tomorrow. They climbed. The city's pulse returned to the walls. The door above them opened onto a cascade of light, and Eli stepped into it as if stepping into weather. He did not know yet that the chorus was listening to the word tomorrow as if it were a password. He did not know yet that Kithra had already decided to trust him even if it ruined her. He did not know yet that the market of borrowed names had begun to whisper his in a new tense. He walked back into the room where the sculpture failed at missing and watched people arrange their faces. He felt like a question that had misplaced its mark. He smiled because the old reflex was still politely alive. Somewhere in the rafters, a camera settled into orbit. Somewhere at the edge of the crowd, Sorrel disappeared like a door that closed without slamming. Somewhere inside his chest, a small animal refused to sit. The music had not started. The lever had not been pulled. The world was still technically reversible. For now,